Well, good morning. It is Friday. You just had your history test yesterday. Hopefully, you did well on that. Make sure you put that in the envelope. But we are heading now into chapter 14, which is about the Second World War. Now, the Second World War, what was the nickname for the First World War? If you remember, the nickname was the war to end all wars. And the problem with wars is that they're horrible, of course, first. That's the death and destruction that occurs because of it. It was an awful thing. That's the first problem with it. But the second problem is that when wars happen, those people who were there, who remember it, who make statements like, this is the war to end all wars, because of how horrible it was, those people die. And others come into power who think that they can and have the desire to take over the world, like Hitler in particular, but Hirohito and Japan, Italy, and Germany, who eventually became together and to do the things that they were doing that they shouldn't have been doing, and they were the enemy. They became the enemy of the world, basically. So in this one, if you go to page 293 in your book, you'll have 3 pages to read, 293, 294, 295. We're going to read a little bit of it together this morning. And so it's at the top of page 293, you have the timeline. It all starts, Germany invades Poland, and that's when the war begins. And Germany invaded Poland, which is just to the west, northwest of Germany. And Germany decides to take over Poland. Really, there was no allies or no European countries who could fight against Germany. Germany had built up a great military force. And the whole thing of what happened, of course, they were promised that they would. They promised they would not. They promised they would. We're not going to do a lot of things, but people who are liars, deceivers, if you listen to the devotion this morning, you'll know what I'm talking about. They always try to deceive for what? For blood, it says. And this is exactly what happened here with Poland. And so it starts with that. Then right toward the end of 1941, for the United States in particular, and this is really what we're focused on in the war. We're not focused on the early years of the war in Europe, although we get involved in the war in Europe, and are the major factor really of why, as far as the United States, a major factor as to why the war ended was because of us. And again, I say us as in the United States, but we get involved because of something Japan does. And the United States had not wanted to get involved in the war. They'd already been involved in World War I. There were many people who died during that time for somebody else's war, in a sense. It was kind of the idea. And we were very much of the nation did not want to get involved in a war that did not involve us directly. Good thing we did, probably. Had Hitler won, had he taken over Europe, guaranteed the United States would have been next on the list, and our ability to fight or to control the attack from them and from Japan, let alone Italy as well, would have really put a great difficulty on our country if we had not gotten involved when it happened. I believe that God is involved in the affairs of man. I know the Bible teaches that, and I think that in this particular instance, when we're talking about them being involved in God being involved in the situation, I believe that He knows that people who have pride. You think about Pharaoh, and how Pharaoh, when Moses came to him, no matter how many times there's some kind of a plague, and Pharaoh begged them to stop the plague, and he would let them go, and then he lied. And he kept changing his mind. He had a hard heart. He did not want to let them go. He just felt like he was too important. He was too proud. You think of Nebuchadnezzar and his pride. And then you go to these other countries and their pride. Pride, isn't it amazing that the first sin that ever occurred, that is recorded in the Bible, was by Satan, and it was pride. He wanted to be like God. That is the root, I think, although the Bible does teach the root of evil, the love of money is the root of all evil, but I think that the root of all sin is pride. pride has a base in all sins that we do. Um, so Germany invades Poland, and World War I begins there on September 1st of 1937, I think is when it happened. Pearl Harbor occurs in December 7th, 1941, as Franklin Roosevelt called it a date, D-A-T-E, that will live in infamy. And then you have all the way through for 5 years to D-Day, actually 3 years, I guess, to D-Day, 3.5 years, in 1944. I guess it is a little bit less than 3 years. D-Day, which is 1944, which was the invasion of the mainland of Europe in France. D-Day, the D stands for day, is Day, believe it or not. The official Japanese surrender in September 2nd of 1945, and then May 8th in 1945, and then September 2nd for Germany in their official surrender. And actually, I guess Japan was September 2nd, and Germany was May 8th. So Europe was first to fall, or first to end their war, and then Japan later on, which it took a couple of atomic bombs being dropped to convince the Japanese to do that. We knew if we hadn't done that, and we'll get to that when we get to there. But let's go ahead and read, so follow along. It says, "Never such a war. As the Great Depression was ending, Americans were plunged into a bigger fight, World War II. They did not want to fight a war. However, when the war came to American soil, the country worked together to win. The world before the war in Europe." It says, "Before World War II, trouble shook Europe. The dictators of the Soviet Union, Italy, and Germany threatened their neighbors' peace. Most countries tried to remain democracies. Great Britain, France, Finland, Czechoslovakia, and Denmark were all fairly stable nations. But even these democracies had political groups that wanted their countries to be more like the dictatorship. During the Spanish Civil War, one democracy fell. In the 1930s, one group of politicians wanted to change Spain. They supported socialism. In 1936, this group of socialists, communists, and other similar parties won national elections. Other politicians and army leaders disagreed and joined together to overthrow the socialist government. For the next 3 years, fighting shattered Spain. Joseph Stalin helped the elected leaders. Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini supported the military and the opposition. Eventually, General Francisco Franco defeated the Socialist and Communist alliance. Franco set up a comparatively mild dictatorship. The problems that tore Spain apart threatened other nations. In France, extreme politicians gained power. Some liked Hitler's Nazi ideas, others supported communism. Even in Britain, many people supported the British Union of fascists. Many Europeans approved of oppressive governments as long as they provided jobs." And so, what was people's focus? People's focus was themselves. They wanted jobs. Now, jobs. People can want jobs for their nation. Right now, I think our nation's in serious trouble if we don't get back to work soon. If we don't open up businesses soon, we are really going to be in serious trouble. Some people believe that these socialists in our country, which there are many now, people who believe in the socialist idea and think that the only reason that socialism has never worked anywhere else is because it hasn't been tried by them, basically, or that by the right people, and they think that they're the right people. But the idea is that that's not the way our country is built, and we don't. The jobs are important. Right now, the ones that are holding us back from working, and you could say it's because of the virus, and I would say that's partly true for sure. The virus has had an effect. However, I think that they are looking a little bit too much. This is something that we really just don't know enough about to know what really is the right answer. Some people would say, they're thinking, this is the thinking of our government right now, we want to save people's lives, so therefore we were trying to make people stay home so we can keep other people from getting sick. Two problems with that. Number one, you can't keep people inside for a long time because they just can't take it. They can't. That's not the way people are made. They're not designed by God that way. We need to be out working. Secondly, is that there are other options besides just keeping us at home. Protecting people by wearing masks or other things that we can do by social distancing can be a help. But the third thing is this: even if we do this now and then the cases go down, or even to none, it's going to flare up again because not everybody has had it, and not everybody who has not had it, they will get it later. and once they get it later, then they will become sick again. So the whole idea of us people doing things for a reason that they think is the right reason doesn't make it the right thing to do. And so and you can go either way with that as far as what I was discussing as far as coronavirus. But Asia and the Americas and World War II begins. These are what you're going to be reading about in the rest of the reading there. You have some pages to do, but if I'm not mistaken, let me double check something. Yeah, you're doing 211 through 214. Now, 211 is extra credit. 212 is a study guide. So really what you're doing is 213, 214. If you want to do 211 as extra credit, that would be great. Go ahead and do that. But 213, 214 are your actual assignments. Finish the reading of 293 and 295, or 294, 295, and then you can go on from there. All right, that's it. Have a good weekend, and we'll see you next Monday. Bye.